double dive of the season. I work on the right side of the waterfall. You try to stay on the left. Stepping it up, man. With 2 dredges, we're going to get down to the bedrock much quicker.
A huge gold strike is unfolding right now, and it's all happening because of a piece of equipment that looks like it belongs in a sci-fi movie. Dustin Hurt has rolled out a machine that's pulling gold nuggets the size of breakfast cereal straight out of the creek. This system doesn't just work around massive boulders, it dominates them, treating rocks the size of refrigerators like loose gravel. In just one run, you're about to watch nearly 14 ounces of gold come to the surface. It's a total game changer, making the old-school mining methods look painfully outdated. Trust me, you'll want to be watching when they hit the motherlode. Deep beneath McKinley Creek lies a fortune no one thought was still there. This creek is legendary, a place where hopes are born, but more often crushed. For decades, everyone claimed the old-timers had already stripped it clean over a century ago. According to the rumors, all that remained was dust and tiny flakes not worth chasing. But Dustin Hurt and his crew just flipped that belief on its head. They proved the doubters wrong by uncovering a single hole worth more than what most people earn in an entire year. It all began with an 8-foot-deep dive hole. After 2 grueling weeks scraping the bottom, the moment of truth finally arrived. Back at camp, they fired up the system and began running the concentrates. The tension was unreal. You could feel it in the air. Out of nowhere, Carlos showed up, and the crew decided to mess with him a bit. They told him the cleanup was a disaster, that all their effort had led to nothing. Carlos was crushed. He knew how much blood, sweat, and time had gone into this dig. Then they revealed the truth. What they had pulled out wasn't fine dust. It was a pile of thick, heavy gold nuggets. Once everything was dried, they held a weigh-in that felt more like a jackpot reveal. First up was the fine gold, 6.94 ounces, at roughly $2,000 an ounce. That alone came out to nearly $14,000. But that wasn't even the best part. Next came the hand-picked nuggets pulled straight from the hole. That stack weighed another 7.3 ounces. Added together, the total haul pushed past 14 ounces, worth close to $30,000. All of that came from a tiny section of creek. People love saying the gold is gone, but Dustin's crew just proved the real riches were hiding deeper than anyone ever dared to dig. The old-timers never touched this spot because the boulders were simply too massive to move with the tools of their time. Of course, finding the gold is only half the battle. Now that they know what's down there, they're facing an even bigger obstacle: giant boulders blocking access to the rest of the pay layer. Some of these rocks are as big as small cars, sitting directly on top of the gold-rich zone. Their standard equipment isn't strong enough to move them. Winches won't budge them. Muscle won't help. And if they want to turn $30,000 into $300,000, those rocks have to go. That means breaking them apart. The problem? All of this work is happening underwater, under intense pressure, where every task is 10 times harder than it would be on land. Their current machine has hit its limit. Dustin knew that if they wanted to keep the gold flowing, they needed something special, a secret weapon. So he made a trip to see a local legend, a man known across Alaska for doing the impossible. Enter One-Eyed Mark. When it comes to moving mountains underwater, no one knows more. Dustin laid it all out. They'd hit a massive submerged boulder that completely stopped their progress. Mark didn't hesitate. He reached into his shop and pulled out a compact rock blasting system designed to shatter stone from the inside out. This wasn't reckless dynamite work. It was precision blasting. Small primer charges placed perfectly to crack even solid granite without destroying the creek. The entire rig was small enough for one person to carry, yet powerful enough to solve their biggest problem. But using explosives underwater is a whole different challenge. You can't just drill a hole, light a fuse, and run. The crew needed to drill directly into the boulder while submerged in freezing, fast-moving water. Mark's setup included a cordless underwater drill that looked like it came straight out of a science fiction film. This wasn't a hardware store tool. Before it could even touch the water, the drill had to be pressurized with air to match the depth of the dive. Too little pressure and water would flood the motor instantly. Too much pressure and the internal components would lock up completely. It's a razor-thin margin that requires careful calculations and a bit of luck. Most people don't realize how dangerous this stage really is. They're handling advanced equipment in an environment that actively wants to destroy it. James was chosen for the job. He's the strongest guy on the crew, even if he doesn't have the most experience with this kind of tech. Strength mattered more here. He needed it to fight the current and force the drill into position. He dropped down 8 feet and started drilling. 3 perfectly placed holes were needed for the full blasting setup. But halfway through the second hole, everything went wrong. The drill suddenly stopped. No spin, no restart. James had to send it back to the surface, and just like that, the operation came to a grinding halt. The plan they were counting on looked like it had already failed before it even had a chance to work, and the mining came to a complete standstill. Everyone stood around staring at the drill, convinced they'd just destroyed their expensive new piece of gear. Then something unexpected happened. Sitting quietly on the riverbank, the drill suddenly roared back to life on its own. That's when it clicked. This wasn't bad luck. It was a pressure problem. The crew realized they'd made a major mistake while setting up the equipment. They had seriously overpressurized the drill. To put it in perspective, a standard car tire runs at about 35 psi. They had cranked this drill all the way up to 90 psi, more than 4 times what was actually needed at the depth they were working. That excessive pressure created intense friction on the internal seals, generating extreme heat. The drill's safety system kicked in, triggering the thermal cutoff because it literally thought the motor was cooking itself. In other words, they were trying so hard to protect the machine that they nearly ruined it. Once they released the extra air and reset the pressure to the correct level, the drill ran perfectly. With the science dialed in, Carlos adjusted the pressure precisely for a 3-meter dive. Water rushed up, debris shifted, and the boulder began to loosen, but it still wasn't enough. James headed back underwater to finish drilling the remaining holes, and this time, everything went smoothly. Now came the most delicate step of the entire operation: loading the primer charges. This part had 0 room for error. Each primer had to fit snugly inside the drilled holes. When the trigger is pulled, an electric current activates the power head, igniting the lowest charge first. Because the rock is solid and the hole is airtight, the explosive force has nowhere to escape. Instead, the energy rips through microscopic fractures inside the stone, tearing it apart from the inside. If the rock were already cracked or loose, the blast would simply dissipate and do nothing. Success depends entirely on trapping that energy for just a split second. Then came the moment of truth. Everyone backed away. The trigger was pulled. The water's surface jumped violently, and a shockwave traveled straight through the ground. Even standing on shore, the crew felt it hit through their boots. It was far more powerful than anyone expected. As the bubbles cleared, the result was undeniable. The massive boulder that had been locking away their gold was now shattered into 3 manageable chunks. Using a cable system, they hauled out the smallest piece. The second it moved, everything changed. The gravel beneath was absolutely packed. Under the glow of the underwater lights, gold was visible everywhere, bright, unmistakable, and untouched. After weeks of fighting the creek, the team finally had their breakthrough. With the boulder gone, the operation shifted into a whole new phase. The crew went from being miners to full-on underwater demolition specialists. What lay beneath looked like something pulled straight from a treasure hunter's journal. Nuggets scattered openly across the bottom. This wasn't a few lucky flakes. It was a concentrated pocket of gold that had been sealed away for thousands of years. James spent the next 5 hours glued to the suction hose, vacuuming gravel that contained more gold than dirt. After clearing just a small section, they checked the sluice box and found a literal pile of nuggets waiting for them. The results were so insane that Dustin couldn't stay on the sidelines any longer. The next day, he got into the water himself. He wanted to see it firsthand. And that was just the beginning. With the drill pressure perfectly calibrated, the next round of blasts went flawlessly. As the broken rock was removed, Dustin began inspecting the exposed bedrock by hand. Almost immediately, he found a nugget, then another, and another. He started shouting through his dive mask so loudly that the crew above thought something had gone seriously wrong. Is he okay? Is he losing it? What's happening down there? Moments later, they got their answer. Dustin was pulling gold so fast that he stopped grabbing it by hand altogether. He switched to the suction hose because it was the only way to keep up. On the surface, Carlos was laughing and yelling at him not to vacuum up everything and to leave some gold for the rest of the team. This new setup was unlocking gold that the old-timers never stood a chance of reaching. 100 years ago, miners didn't have pressurized underwater drills or precision blasting systems with thermal protection. When they hit an immovable rock, that was it. They had to walk away. And that's exactly why all this gold was still waiting. What this really means is that Dustin has become the very first person in history to ever touch this exact layer of Earth. No one has mined it before. The reason the gold is everywhere is because, over thousands of years, the creek naturally pushed and packed it into these deep pockets. It's literally a dream scenario for any gold miner. Dustin ended his dive early, not because he was tired, but because he couldn't wait to show the crew what he'd uncovered. He told them there were ounces and ounces of gold sitting in the box, and for once, that wasn't an exaggeration. When Dustin climbed out of the water, he was smiling like he hadn't in years. After 4 seasons working McKinley Creek, this was the first time he'd ever seen gold coming up non-stop, almost like it was riding a conveyor belt straight to the surface. For the final hour of that dive, all he saw was yellow. That new blasting system has completely rewritten the rules. Rock size no longer matters. Nothing underground can block them anymore. The balance of power has flipped. For years, the creek decided where they could mine. Now, Dustin and his machine are calling the shots. He said, this is a day he'll remember for the rest of his life, and it's easy to understand why. They've officially entered big money territory. Without question, this was the most productive run this team has ever had. That puts us over 40 ounces, Dustin said. We're improving every season. 41.5 ounces so far, and that's not even counting the nuggets. That's over $80,000. And this is just the beginning. They're now staring at a future where entire sections of the creek, areas once written off as impossible, are suddenly wide open. That puts the possibility of millions of dollars in gold firmly on the table. Of course, it raises the question, is this a long-term breakthrough, or did they just strike an insanely lucky pocket? Here's the thing. They're finding this gold because they're using technology miners never had access to before. It's the perfect mix of fearless underwater work and smart engineering. The crew is already scouting where the next blast will go. They know the gold is down there, and now they finally have the tools to reach it. But this story isn't just about money. It's about proving that the American wilderness still holds real wealth for those willing to take the risk and put in the work. Every time they drop an explosive 8 feet underwater, they're gambling the entire season. One mistake with that pressure-sensitive drill could shut everything down. But for Dustin Hurt and his crew, the payoff makes the danger worth it. They've found the motherboard, and they're not stopping until every last ounce is pulled from that creek and stacked in their pockets. This marks the beginning of a new era in gold mining, and if this run is any indication, the numbers are only going to climb from here. But even as the gold piled up, no one on the crew was celebrating just yet. Veterans know better than to get comfortable. McKinley Creek has a long memory, and it doesn't give up its secrets easily. Every time the team makes progress, the creek finds a new way to push back. Stronger currents, collapsing walls, or hidden rocks waiting just out of sight. What makes this moment different is confidence, not luck, not hype. Confidence built on proof. For the first time, Dustin isn't guessing where the gold might be. He's watching it appear, run after run, straight out of untouched ground. This isn't scattered placer gold anymore. It's a system, a pattern. And patterns mean repeatable results. The deeper truth is that this creek wasn't exhausted by the old-timers, it was misunderstood. They mined what they could reach, not what actually held the wealth. Their tools limited their vision. When they hit immovable stone, they moved on. That decision sealed these deep pockets away like a time capsule, preserving them until technology finally caught up. Now the team stands at a crossroads. Every blast opens new ground, but it also raises the stakes. Bigger boulders lie ahead, heavier overburden, narrower margins for error. One bad calculation could flood a hole, damage gear, or halt production entirely. And yet, the crew keeps moving forward. Why? Because moments like this don't come often. When gold starts flowing this consistently, you don't walk away. You adapt. Plans are already changing. Dive schedules are being extended. Equipment upgrades are being discussed. The operation is quietly shifting from seasonal mining to something far more serious. This isn't just a good day on the creek. It's a turning point. Dustin knows that what they're doing now could redefine how underwater placer mining is done in Alaska. Others will try to copy it, some will fail, some won't. But this crew will always be remembered as the ones who proved it was possible. As the sun drops behind the trees and the water calms, the creek looks the same as it always has. Silent, cold, unimpressed. But beneath the surface, the balance has changed. What was once unreachable is now exposed, and the gold that waited centuries in darkness is finally moving. Tomorrow, they'll go deeper. Not because it's easy, not because it's safe, but because now they know exactly what's down there, and McKinley Creek isn't done paying out yet. So, what do you think? Will this machine keep delivering millions, or is the creek about to push back? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe.